All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. I'm here with David Brown. It's April 7th, 2022. We're at David's home in Wilsonville. David, thanks so much for joining us today. First question to get us started is why wine?
Yeah, before we dive into that, I want to thank you for taking the time to come interview me, and also thank the Linfield program. It was really a wise move, I think, to create the video archive and have that record of the industry. And so, just want to give a shout out to whoever's behind that.
We appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And also to your work. So why wine? It's a fascinating question, isn't it? If you look at people as they come through college and the number of people that actually graduate in the degree that they start in, the numbers are very low, and then actually the people that are working in the field that they graduated in is very low. So it's interesting, all the different crossroads and foundational elements that lead us to our destination. For me, it started very young in life. My father's business, Mitchell Lewis, was an agricultural supplier. And so I grew up bouncing around in the front seat of a pickup truck with my dad out at looking at agricultural operations, and just became really inspired by that. The diversity of agriculture in the Northwest and a well-run farming operation is just I thought it was such a beautiful thing. Orchards up in Yakima and hops over at Moxie and the row crops that were here in the valley and wheat harvest up in the Palouse. It was all just beautiful. And then also the opportunity to be a steward of the land. I've got a real affinity for property and being able to manage property and enhance it, develop it, and have it reach its full potential, and also have an eye on the aesthetics of that is really very rewarding for me. So you start with that base of a real inspiration of agriculture. And then secondarily, my dad's business was down in lower southeast Portland, the central east side. And that neighborhood was really entrepreneurial and all the cycles of life existed there. And post-World War II, there was a really strong sense of community and a lot of hope and optimism. And so I'm super fortunate. I grew up thinking that everything was possible, right? Where if you look at the demographics, there's not a lot of people that get to have that experience. And there were all these interesting businesses that were around, and had friends that were in the produce business, and so I was around that, and to see all the different crops that would come in at different times of the year. And the Portland wholesale flower market was down in lower southeast, and got to be in and around that, and you just get connected to these cycles of life. And it was really very impactful for me. And then also, there were these businesses that were doing these cool things. My folks would host an end of season dinner each year. And they would do it at these old school Italian restaurants that were down in that neighborhood. And there was the sharing of a big meal at the end of the season, and wine was always a part of that. And so you really start to see wine as a celebration, and for special occasions, and also as people have done this hard work and the seasons come to the end, and to get connected to those cycles was really an interesting thing for me. I think that neighborhood and growing up in a business was probably more impactful for me and more inspirational and shaped me more than almost anything that I've done. And then it had a foundation in agriculture, and so you get that layer going on. And then right across the street from my father's business was an old school wine distribution house, Roberti's House of Wines. And I just became really smitten with that. I would see these seagoing containers come in that had come from overseas, and that just became really fascinating to me. Add in all of the products that were available domestically, and you start to think globally, even as a young person, and that these products are coming from overseas, and that just was fascinating to me. And I literally, it's kind of cliche, but I did my seventh grade report of what do you want to be when you grow up, and I wanted to be in the wine business. And went over and interviewed the people at Roberti's and looked at that and gave my presentation at my seventh grade class, and it stuck with me. I think as I look back at my life, it seems as though I'm drawn to projects that can be a lifelong pursuit. And wine and business became part of that array. So then you come forward. I went to school down at Oregon State and have a real love of science. I have a degree in science, and so you take a couple years of chemistry, you take general chemistry, and you take organic chem, and that enables you to take upper division science classes. So I took both life science classes and plant science classes. And you take plant physiology and plant propagation and plant pathology, and those were really, I'm a science bug, and then you get that kind of level of information, and it just was really motivational for me. I knew at that time that, I wanted to try and do something that was involved with agriculture and involved with plants, and I've got a real affinity for that, and so it was more of these foundational elements that led me to wine. And I met at school a couple of my good buddies who grew up in the Bay Area, and they, as young people, they were going up to Napa. And they said, Dave, you've got to come see this, right? You've got to come down and go experience this. So picture probably 1980, and we'd fly down to San Francisco and take one of their cars and go up to Napa, and we go tasting. There were no tasting fees. We slept in the park, and and now what would that be? It'd be 40 plus years ago, right? So then the bug really bites you, right? I've got this agricultural foundation and science background, and then you start to see vineyards, and it begins to materialize that somehow I'd like to be in this business. And then when I got out of school, I've also was fortunate. A buddy of mine was starting an art gallery here in town and was traveling to New York to meet artists and develop his group of artists that would work with his, and I got to go tag along on a bunch of those journeys and started to collect art and meet artists, and I became really fascinated with the creative process and understanding that and dialoguing with people that are actually doing creative work, and really became very special to me. And one form of creativity seems to inform another. And so seeing an artist's studio is really cool. Seeing the work that they do, understanding the process, the thought process, and what the inputs were to get them to that point. So I think I bring that real creative bent to any of the projects that we do, whether it I think a creative overlay for business is very good, and I feel very fortunate to approach business in creative fashion. But then certainly if you're in the wine business or you're developing a vineyard and the site, to have a creative overlay, I think, is some of the special sauce to that. So then, get out of school and traveling some to look at art in New York, and then a buddy of mine says, hey, I'm going to, Italian roots, I want to go experience Italy, and I'm going to rent a house in the hills above Siena, and I'm going to go for a season. And would you like to go? And we're just going to kick around and experience Italy. And I said, well, yeah, okay, I'm in, right? So we went and did that, and it turns out that the people that owned the house, the man was a banker, and his son was involved with one of the wine consortiums. And so they essentially got us backstage passes at all of these wineries and vineyards that were in the hills around Siena, and these great restaurants that were there. And so, if I was really very leaning towards wine and leaning towards vineyard, and then once I came back from Italy, it was just it was just something that I felt like I had to do. Mm-hmm. So then you come forward a little bit further, and the distribution business had always been really compelling to me, and we looked hard at vineyard property here in the valley, and I just could never find a site that I really was excited about. And the distribution business was still there, and I had this affinity with that lower east side of Portland, and ended up finding an old building down there. When we would go to New York, there were all these great old buildings that people had made these lofts in, and they had these big studios. We were kicking around Soho when it was still really gritty and artists, and now it's Louis Vuitton stores, right? But really, really special experiences to go to artist lofts in Soho, and just became captivated with those old buildings. So found this, same time I was looking at vineyard property, I was looking at old buildings in the Central East Side, and the building went out. I ended up finding a building, and it just seemed so well suited for the distribution business. That had been in my mind since I was literally a child. And so in 2005, we started the Mitchell Wine Group, and both as an importer and also as a distributor. And that was really terrific, has been a terrific experience. And also, I love a good collaboration. I love building a team. I love empowering others to have the experience. And the general manager of the wine group, Edwin Martinez, is a terrific person. Spent his whole adult career in the wine business. He and I are really aligned on our vision and the opportunity, and we saw that there was really a need for additional independent distribution. We've got the big multi-state businesses that are aligned with the publicly traded portfolios, and so they're so focused on that portion of their business that it's really difficult for them to give the attention to the small, independent, family-owned labels. And so we thought, gosh, we can do that. We can tell the story, and we can give them good service. And on the customer interface side, because those big businesses, it's really difficult for them also to give that individualized customer service that we could see the need for. So we spawned the wine group. And that has been a terrific project, and we have good success and good momentum. But the other thing that it did for me, it was like plugging me into an encyclopedia of wine knowledge, because they were everybody we hired down there was just living it, and adult professionals working in the wine industry. And so the information that I really craved about all of the wine regions of the world, and the different styles of wine, and the different blends, and what those historic properties were that were really successful, and what their story was. There was no way that I could capture all that information as rapidly and as thoroughly as we did through the wine group, and developing the portfolio there. And developing the portfolio is a really rewarding experience, and interfacing with winemakers, and bringing their product to market and helping them is a terrific thing. So then the vineyard never left me, right? And so we start the distribution and import business, and we're chugging along, and I get to the point with my primary business, Mitchell Lewis, where I feel like that I've got some additional capacity, and I think that to really do a vineyard, it's a commitment. You've got to really have your wits about you, and it's not something that you're going to just jump into on a casual basis, or I'm not. I want to get in and be thoughtful about it and make good decisions and have the best shot at success. So we started looking at vineyard property again. And of course I looked here in the valley, and the story is just being told so well in the valley. There's so many terrific properties and beautiful facilities and great wines that I'm probably more of an experimental. I'm drawn that way. I want to be. I really admire the old stories about the first people that planted Pinot here, and that process of experimentation to me is also very interesting. So we started looking at other areas and said, well, where else could we go? We'd done a big irrigation project up in Walla Walla through Mitchell Lewis, and went back up there and kicked around and looked. And Red Mountain was someplace that had come on my radar scope clear back in the 70s. Through work, I started hearing about vineyards that were being planted on Red Mountain, so went and looked there, and still again didn't find anything that really bit me. But on those trips, we're driving up the gorge, right? And so, start to really look at the gorge and understand that. And it's really interesting because in a fairly short distance, you go from the cool climate varietals to the warm season varietals. And that diversity of the warm season varietals, once I really started to grasp that it was super compelling. Right? So we took I started kicking around up in the Dalles. I started driving around up in the hills and looking at property, and took the climatological data from the Dalles and laid it over these great wine growing regions that we'd learned about through the wine group, and the south of France and Bordeaux and Italy and Spain, and you could see that there was just the opportunity to ripen a huge group of varietals. So we ended up finding a piece of property up there in 2017, and we're able to acquire that. And the big issue was water, and I'm in the water business, and so we wanted to be really in compliance there and getting water rights transferred, and we were able to get all that done, which is you look back at something you've done and you realize, geez, that was actually quite a project. And then we had to bring the water infrastructure into the site. There was a well there, but there was no buried main lines, and so that ended up being quite a project. Well, then we immediately went looking for a viticulturist that could help develop the project. And through the OSU Extension Service, they referred me to Joe Cushman. And Joe grew up in the Gorge and has a degree in viticulture from OSU and is from a winemaking family. And like Edwin, he is just a terrific guy and knows so much and is so well connected and really is just a fabulous individual and super knowledgeable. So sat down with Joe and started talking about the opportunity there, and we had this site, and would he be interested in joining our team and really helping develop the property. So he took that concept. He and Edwin, because Edwin knew wines of the world, and he knew really well, much better than I do. And Joe knows soils and climates and all of that, and knew what could ripen. And so they took the task and really looked at all of the varietals that we could potentially plant. And Edwin with his market knowledge and wine region knowledge and the blends and all of that, because we're also intent about not only growing the main constituent of a blend, but growing the blending grapes. So we started with quite a list, right? And we ended up whittling it down, and we landed with 18 varietals. We have 18 different varietals planted at Threemile in the Dalles, and that seems crazy, but what that does for us is there's all these terrific wineries that are here in the valley, and they have the points of distribution all over the United States. And Oregon is a hot category. So if they want to experiment with another varietal, they can do that, and they can push it out through their distribution, or they can make a limited run and they can run it through their wine club or through their tasting house, and it gives them additional something to experiment with, something to be creative with. The fruits from Oregon, so they can label it as Oregon and hit those categories. And initially there were some people that were about the Dalles. There were certainly people that questioned that decision. Oh, geez, it's so far out there, and it's the Dalles, and what's going on? But then we started to get some traction with people that could see the opportunity, and that became productive. And we're now we're in our second year harvest this year, and we'll have about 120 tons. When we're fully developed, we'll be 300 tons plus, and all of that second year fruit is sold, and we've got people that want more. So the hypothesis has proved out, and that's a great thing. So it's really, all those building blocks for me. It's this love of agriculture, and it is my science background, and it's collaborating with people, and it is and empowering them, and it's a creative process. And those things all really, for me, are super compelling. Because why would you say something? Geez, I'm 65 years old. Why would you be developing a vineyard at 65, right? But it will live on. And that's a cool thing, to be able to be part of the development of something that actually has a life and will continue on into the future is a cool thing. Mm-hmm.
So many questions I have after all of that. Let's back up a little bit to let's start with the Mitchell Wine Group. You talked about kind of seeing an opportunity for more smaller independent brands that needed help distributing, and so tell me about, as you were getting that started, what were you looking for who you wanted to represent, who you wanted to import, and tell me about building those relationships and getting started with the Mitchell Wine Group.
Sure. Our goal was to develop a portfolio of products from the entire world, right? So that all of the major wine growing regions would be represented. If you're going to go into a solid account, whether it be grocery or whether it be on-premise restaurants, they want to see a solid book and good choices. And Portland is so eclectic. There's such an opportunity to bring to market these smaller production products. And the big name brands, if you go back, people my age, baby boomers, we all grew up, we gravitated towards one product, and they bought it, and they bought it, and they bought it. And you look at millennials and Gen X, and that's not their process. They're experimenting with a lot of different things, and they want to see not just the old historic brand, but they want to see the new up-and-coming things. And so we could see that. We knew that was the trend. And so it gives us the chance to develop partnerships with wineries from all over the world that are either historic, that are not the large enough brands that would be represented by the big houses, or they're up-and-comers. There's a lot of great people that have entered into the winemaking field over the course of the last 10 years. It'd be really interesting to know how many new winemakers, because the population of wineries here in the valley, it's just exponential, right? What is there? Hundreds.
600 maybe?
Right.
Yeah.
All those people need help with distributing their product, and to pick through there and find the ones that we have a kinship with and that we like the wines that they're producing and the style, and developing those relationships and helping them bring their product to market. The distribution business is kind of like a bookstore. You think how many books are actually produced, and somebody's got to make a decision, well, which of these are we going to try and run through the store and introduce to our clients? And that's a lot of what we do is we edit. There's a lot of product available. Somebody told me that with separate producers and varietals and vintages, there might be 80,000 different products that are available domestically. So, our book is 3,000 SKUs. How do you choose 3,000 out of 80,000? And then be able to take those to market. So it's just, it's a lot of fun in a lot of ways. Developing the portfolio is really cool. Building the team is something that's very special to me. Collaborating with them, learning from them is also really rewarding for me. So it's been a great experience.
You use the word kinship. I like that word. Kinship, when you're looking for who to represent. What does that, as that's evolved, what has that meant to you? What is the kinship that you are hoping to find in a partner?
Yeah, because of my work, I've studied the foundational elements of a healthy relationship. We study culture at work. We have core values. I have personal core values, and what I found is that if you're fair and honest, then you have the opportunity to build trust and respect. And if you can achieve those things, then you can actually have a meaningful dialogue with somebody. If there's not trust and there's not respect, then it's transactional. Right? And we all have transactional relationships that we have to navigate through. But it's certainly my preference is to have relationships, business relationships, personal relationships that are built on a foundation of honesty and fairness and trust and respect. Those are my cornerstones.
So as that's reflected in the brands, are there certain stories you're excited to tell? Are there certain types of wineries, farming practices, wine styles that you're really excited to kind of enter into a partnership with?
Yeah. There's certainly a bunch of different interesting elements there. And we're drawn to originality and authenticity. And people that are really passionate about what they do. There's people that are in things for a lifestyle play, and or as a financial move, and we're probably most drawn to the people that it is a creative endeavor. We partner well with those people.
So obviously you're not focused entirely on the Oregon wine industry itself, but I'm curious, as you started the brand in 2005, what were your kind of perceptions of Oregon wine and as you were looking for people to represent, did you find a lot of people here that you were excited about?
Yeah, they're just an amazing crop of winemakers and vineyards, and it's world renowned, right? So there's no shortage of great stories and great properties and all of that. It's finding people that on the Oregon level that actually want to be represented in Oregon. They're, the way it's sliced now is a lot of people are just selling everything through a tasting a facility, and maybe they make 2,000-3,000 cases, and they're able to move all that through their tasting room, and so they don't really need distribution. And then you get to the point where you actually do need distribution, and then how many states are you in, or what can you bring to me? Well, one of the hurdles that we've faced is you get to those bigger brands, and they don't just want Portland, they want Seattle, and they want Spokane, and they want Boise. They want a region. And so there's a threshold there. We're effective with somebody that's satisfied with getting good numbers out of Oregon, and we're not currently set up to deliver them Seattle. So you get up to that brand that is making those kinds of case counts, that wants that regional play, and then they're with the multi-state partners. There's certainly a lot of people that we've talked to that said, God, we'd love to be able to peel off Oregon and give it to you, but it potentially hamstrings us in another state. We then get marginalized, and Seattle's a much bigger market, and so they're worried about losing momentum in Seattle or in San Francisco or in Denver. So, you kind of have to dance through that and find people that want solid Oregon representation and also are like-minded. Is really, but there's plenty of them, right? It's not like there's any shortage of people that we could actually, it's one of the challenges that we face is, how many like local brands can you really have in one house? And there's somebody that fits a certain price point and quality, and they say, hey, just having us or maybe one other partner is okay, but you don't want to have 5. And so there's other people that we'd love to work with and that I think would like to work with us, but you don't want to get yourself spread too thin. You want to be able to give good service to everybody that you're working with.
What about on the other side, as you're looking for partners on the retail side or the restaurant side? What are your are there certain specialty kind of places you're looking for? Is it a similar kind of relationship build? And how have you found most success for the distribution?
Yeah, the restaurant kind of breaks down to 2 things. You've got these chains that have a higher profile, steakhouses, and they're looking for these marquee brands that the baby boomers, right? You go into a steakhouse and you look at their wine list, and I don't mean to throw cold water on that, but it's pretty predictable what's there. Where you go into the independent restaurants that are here locally, and it's a completely different wine list. It's that eclectic, small batch, and that's really where we're more effective. Because those big brands are with the big distribution houses. So that's the, successful over here. We're successful at the big houses too, because we bring some Oregon products and those things in. But they're more promoting, these big California cabs with the big names, and that's it's a different game.
You mentioned a couple of times kind of one of the things you enjoy most about business is finding and building a team. Tell me about your process for that as you're looking for people to add to a team. How do you seek out? What are kind of the qualities you're looking for? And then once you have people on board, what are your kind of strategies for building and kind of growing the team?
Yeah, that's a whole dissertation. I started by having multiple different profiles done on myself by different consultants so that I could understand really what my skill set was and what my attributes were. And then that also shows you the people that you will partner with well, and to understand that, not just what the functional expertise that they may bring to the table or the domain expertise that they may bring to the table, but what do they look like culturally, and are we aligned on that side of the equation? Because that's the really important piece, is that cultural alignment. Mm-hmm. So we're super picky, right? We will advertise for people, we network for people, we're on an ongoing basis, we're looking for additional resources for all the businesses. And we have a vigorous screening process that we go through. Again, we're assessing domain expertise that they would bring to the table and whatever the functional area is that they would be working in. Of course, they have to have those skills, but then it's also a cultural fit. Because if you don't have that, it just ends up being problematic. And we're really based on a foundation there of humility. People succeed in our system that are humble and that just want to do good work, and they feel self-actualized in that process. So it's really for us about creating an ecosystem for an individual so that they can bloom and grow and achieve their potential. And some people want to come into the business environment and they really just want to be role players, which is great. We need a lot of those people, but there's other people that want to be playmakers. And those are the ones that I'm really focused on, is people that cultural fit and that can be playmakers. And then create that environment, nurture them so that they can have a chance to work up to their potential. So many people, there's so many talented people out there that have just never been given the right environment and the right opportunity. So it's one of the things that's probably most rewarding to me is when we get that right. And you can create an environment and bring somebody in and they have a good experience. And we track our rate of turnover and compare that to the market so that we know. And we have super low turnover through all the Mitchell companies, single digit. And get a lot of people there. It's one of my speeches to people is I want it to be the last job they have. I want them to work there till they don't want to work anymore. Well, you start talking to somebody that's taken these 2 and 3 year assignments and they're building the resume and they're doing that, and that's just so foreign for people. Your last job, what are you talking about? I'm only 35 years old, right? But it's super important. Really good things happen. 3 months, 9 months, 6 months. People come in and they're going to be successful and they're going to be impactful and they're going to do good work. But the really, really cool stuff happens downstream. I mean, if you can keep somebody focused and in it 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, you really can have some interesting work that gets done at that point. So giving them the long-term opportunities, selling the long-term opportunities, selling the culture, and getting them connected to that, and then crafting an environment that is favorable so that they can back to that trust and respect, and that they feel that, and they feel appreciated, and they feel empowered. Those are real things. We don't just talk that. It's for real, right? Because if it's just talk, that becomes thin. They're out. So it's got to be for reals.
You mentioned earlier kind of the importance of creativity to you in your work, and as you said, it's not always thought of as, business isn't always thought of as necessarily a creative field. So I'm curious, as you've worked in the business and done a variety of things, how have you been able to find ways to inject creativity into the process, and what are some of maybe your favorite examples of that from especially on the wine side of things?
Yeah. When they did the profiles on me, and a couple of things came out in that were interesting. And one is that I have kind of a marketing mindset, and that was interesting. That was part of what was compelling about the opportunity in the Dalles, is to be able to be part of creating the narrative rather than just jumping in where that's already been really well defined and really well structured. There's a bunch of people up there doing really cool stuff and they've got a big lead on us, and they're doing great work. But to be able to come in and add additional content to the narrative is really cool. So, that feels like a creative process to me. And then in business, the other thing that I profile or that I feel like might be, an attribute is being able to see opportunity, and then to be able to also see the steps that you need to take to be able to achieve the objectives. There's a great book by Adam Grant called Nonconformists Move the World. I don't know if you know that, but as a kid, if you're a nonconformist, you get labeled, and it's tough until you really realize that that's potentially an attribute, right? And you can leverage that. Then that was a real epiphany for me as an adult. I knew that I didn't know everything about business. I knew that I needed to bring additional people in that knew more about certain things that I did. I knew I needed to empower them and to trust them and invest into them. And then, but seeing opportunities is something that I feel like, you know, maybe it's just from being in an environment for such a long time, things become apparent to you. But, you know, that's one of the ways that I present when I'm profiled. And then also seeing the steps that you need to take to be able to achieve your objectives. And marketing, really, at the very root of marketing, it's about creating awareness. And by creating awareness, then you make yourself more accessible. And if you can, that initial awareness is created in a favorable way, a favorable light, then when people get to the point where they want to partner with you, then a lot of the work is done. Again, it's not transactional. So I think that, you know, thinking about that whole envelope, thinking about opportunities and the steps that you need to take to be able to achieve those, and that team building and culture, and then how do you present that to the market or to the audience, or for me, it's a creative endeavor. And there's certainly books that are written about that, and you can, you know, there's all kinds of information, but it's organic. It's a feeling thing, and you meet somebody and you feel good energy from them, and you can bring them onto the team, and you share a vision, and you begin to collaborate, and you have that experience, and you know that's really very rewarding. And then I'm able to be informed by these other creative things, the landscaping, the gardens, the art. You know, I'm the guy that when I go to another city, I go to the art museum and go visit galleries and go visit the botanical gardens and go visit the high-end wine retailer to see what they're doing, right? And look at their products. And when I go to a restaurant, I love looking at the wine list and seeing, you know, what are you doing here, right? But that information somehow becomes inspiration for me in my business dealings. I don't exactly know how that connection works, but I visit with artists and they say, yeah, that's exactly what our process is that, you know, we go look at things. A painter that we've been able to collect a number of his pieces, and he was commissioned to do a piece down in Nevada for a foundation. And, you know, so they fly him out and give him a rental car and say, go out and drive around, right? And he said, I'm bopping around out in the desert and taking pictures and taking notes, and then ends up creating these amazing, like 12 foot by 12 foot multiple panels that went in this foundation. But it was through that gathering of information and then reflection. And then that gets turned into some form of creation. And that seems to be the same process that I go through with everything, especially the businesses and developing the businesses. And then you sprinkle in the culture and the people thing and collaboration, and there you go.
So over developing multiple businesses, you've talked a lot about some of the parts of it that are very important to you. Is there an underlying philosophy for you, business philosophy for you, that you mentioned core principles earlier. Is there a core principle business philosophy for you?
Sure. You may know, here a year or so ago, there's a group, the Business Roundtable, and the Business Roundtable for years, these are big Fortune 500 companies, and they have put out a statement about the purpose of a corporation. And for years, for decades, the purpose of the corporation had been to make money for the shareholders. And they finally said that the purpose of a corporation is much deeper than that. And they identified the other audiences that are in play there. And we've known those for years. We want to serve, of course, the customers that we work with. We want to serve the suppliers that we work with. We want to serve the employees that are part of the business. And then the last one is a connection to the community. And I hear that from me, that post-World War II and that strong sense of community is really compelling to me. And I want to be that person that we're doing right in society and helping people. We don't make a big deal about it, but we do some philanthropic work, and that's a cool thing. Those are it's great to be able to do that, and to be able to be a good citizen in the community and be able to share the experience. So, philosophically, it's serving all the audiences and doing that in balance and doing that well. And then also having a core set of values and principles that you really are rigid about. That was also a transformational moment for me. I somehow ended up finding the Maslow's hierarchy of needs and started reading about that. And one of his concepts, for you to achieve that full self-actualization, it's through this building of a foundation. And one of those building blocks is having a core set of values that you don't compromise on. That compromising on your core values will cause a loss of self-esteem, right? So, I think we've all been in situations where you're around people that were a little sketchy, and you weren't really aligned with what they were doing, but you continued to go along, and I don't do that anymore. You got to be prepared to walk away from people that are not healthy for you, and really align yourself with people that you share common values and common principles, and treat people similarly. So that's been really empowering for me to have that filter, have that knowledge, have that understanding, so that you can sense something that is not going to be a healthy interaction for you, and be able to steer away from that, or not let yourself the risk is that you try and make an emotional, intellectual connection to someone or some group or something that is not healthy. And then you've invested into that, and it doesn't come to fruition. And those things are, it's a bad use of time. Bad use of time, bad use of energy.
So let's talk about Threemile a little bit. You mentioned having spent multiple parts of your business life looking for a vineyard site and never quite finding it. So you're finally looking in the Dalles. What about the site finally spoke to you? What made this the place?
Yeah. As a kid, I grew up here in the valley, and we would drive out to Bald Peak, and being up on property where you had a view was always really magic to me, and we all dreamed about being at some view property. And it's one of the filters, one of the things that we've looked at here in the valley was would there be a property that also had a lot of character? And when you get in the hills above the Dalles, at our base we're at about 1,200 feet, and then it goes up to 1,800 feet. And I don't know if you've seen any images from the site, but it's just really a very beautiful piece of property. It's got these terrific views, and for just miles and miles. And then we're far enough out that there's not a lot of development, and that's really interesting to me. So it was one of those properties that the first time I walked on it, somebody else was working with somebody else at work that was also looking at properties for me, and I asked them to go and check this thing out. And he came back and he said, "Dave, I think you need to saddle up and go see this place." Right? I had found it, but asked him to go do an initial walk. And so we met the property owner. It was a woman, and I told her at the time, I said, "We're going to make you a full price offer. This is done." Right? It just was so. I just loved it. I just loved it. I loved the views. I loved the slope. I loved the soils. I took soil science in school, and so soil is really fascinating to me. And we got up there just straight away with a small excavator and started digging some pits. Joe, the vineyard manager, did that, and he comes back and he goes, "Dave, there's some places where the freaking soil is 8 feet deep up here." And we were just like, and I don't know, you've studied geology and you know about the Missoula floods and the alluvials, but it's just an incredible journey, the development of the soils up there. So, to have water and to have the slope and the aspect towards the sun and the soil and the views and stuff just was, I asked Joe in one of our interviews, I said, if I assigned to you the task of going to the gorge and finding a piece of property that met all of our needs to be able to do this, what about the Threemile site is deficient? Where are our gaps? And he said, "Dave, there are none. It's perfect." So, and that, he's a viticulturist, and there was no reason for him to sugarcoat it with me, right? I wanted the honest information, so that was really good news. Good to hear.
So, working with Joe, obviously, on you mentioned kind of the big list of what we could do here, and then winnowing it down to the 18 varieties you wanted to plant. As you started to develop the vineyard, aside from water obviously being an issue, was there anything else that you weren't expecting about developing a vineyard? Were there any other kind of unexpected challenges in it, and what were the solutions?
Yeah. Those old properties that had been in people's families for a long time, there was, we actually bought several different tax lots as a cluster. And so there was a couple old dwellings and people that have been on the site for decades. And so I'm famous for thinking things can happen quicker and easier than, right? I can see the end and I thought, sure, we go out there and put water infrastructure in and clean this site up. But I was just shocked at how much debris that was there, that old cars, old farm equipment, old appliances, just from decades of and so that turned out to be quite a project to actually just get the site cleaned up. Was then the other thing that is challenging for everybody everywhere is labor. There's a bunch of laborers up there that are doing harvest for the tree fruits, but getting people to do trellising and getting people to do plant and install the drip irrigation. And we managed all that ourselves. Joe managed it. So, that was, at some time we had 30 people up there working at one time. So that was a real challenge to really get the quality that we wanted and people that knew what we were doing. So, but we came through that. I think we were successful on that side too. A lot of the people that we bought those supplies from are customers of my primary business, Mitchell Lewis. They're the irrigation contractors in that market that also sell trellising and whatever. So it was great that we had those kind of pre-existing relationships. So you're working with somebody that is a known commodity to you. And our man that covered that area, Reed Stewart, was also really helpful. He was the guy that was helping me look at properties all over Washington and Oregon, and knows the dealer community that is in the irrigation business and in the trellising business. And so, we're not foreign resources to those people. So that was super helpful.
When you were talking about Threemile earlier, you mentioned some sort of initial skepticism about the Dalles itself and the potential for selling the fruit, finding people for it, and obviously that turned out to be not true. But I'm curious, as you were sort of planning to come to market and planning to have your first harvest, your first fruit, were you sort of seeking out people who wanted to buy your fruit? Were people finding you, and what were you looking for kind of in buyers of that fruit?
Yeah, we, from the start, we made the decision not to be trying to sell the fruit, that what we wanted to do was just really socialize the project with people. If the dynamic is you trying to sell something to somebody, there's constraints to that relationship. Where if we can just socialize the project with people and get them excited about what we're doing and tell our story, and then ultimately, if they want the fruit, they're going to ask us. And then you've got a much different dynamic than you do if we're, so we identified, we started with all the wineries in Oregon and Washington, and we started to just whittle that down to people that we'd love to work with. And that was Edwin. Edwin owned that. He knows those relationships, and the people at the wine group know all those people, and they say, this would be a good partner, this would be a good partner. And so then we just contacted those people and said, hey, we just want to tell you about the project that we're working on, and we're developing a vineyard in the Dalles, and here's the varietals that we're working with, and we'd love to have you come see, and we'd love to have your input about what we're doing and what your thoughts are. And we never tried to sell the fruit, and we're still not. We're still just socializing the project with people. And then those that are interested have come to us and said, hey, we'd like to experiment with the fruit, or we think you guys are doing a good thing, and we're interested. And that's worked terrific. And again, you've got a really different relationship with your partner at that point than if you've gone to them trying to sell them something. And we wanted that. And then the additional collateral benefit is our experience with the distribution business. So we're able to provide counsel. Even there's people that are buying grapes from us, that we're not distributing their wine, right? But it's a different dialogue than with their distributor partner. And it enables us, positions us so that we can have a conversation with them about distribution. They may be having a problem in Kansas. And Edwin's able to say, oh, have you tried this? Or have you worked with this person? Or, what's your goals? And really provide some thoughtful counsel to people that there's a lot of value. And then the people that we are actually distributing their product, it's just taken that communication pipeline and just blown it open and made it really much more rich and a lot more detail and a lot more of a partnership than if it's just a pure buy-sell distribution relationship. We have great relationships with the producers now, but selling them fruit is just a different deal, right? So that's been really cool to watch that bloom.
You kind of indicated earlier the kind of the growth of the gorge and the kind of the excitement and enthusiasm around gorge. I'm curious, now that you're invested in it and you're seeing it on a much closer basis, what are you seeing in the gorge? What does it look like right now as a wine growing region, and what do you see as you look ahead for it?
Yeah. I'm not able to really quantify the buzz as well as others, but we were interviewed. Someone else contacted me for an interview recently, and we did that a couple weeks ago. A blogger, and he's profiled a bunch of interesting people. There's some crossover with the who all's on your video archive, but his has where you've been more focused here, Oregon. He's interviewing people up in Walla Walla and, like I say, Red Mountain and all of that. And he told me, he says, how did you get this figured out? And that's he goes, there's a lot of buzz all over about the gorge. And, I think at the root of that is back to the entrepreneurial spirit. People really admire and respect people that are willing to be the first to try something. And then you think back, the first people that planted Pinot and Chardonnay here in the valley, and everything built off of that. And the first people that, developed Napa and these other regions. So, we believe that the gorge is one of those kinds of opportunities. We've also been looking at sub-AVAs up there, and there's a lot of good information. The old AVAs, when they were drawn, they just have so much more information now. They understand the inputs so much better. So, I think some of the natural next steps for the gorge is sub-AVAs. Hood River's cool season, Mosier's in the middle, the Dalles is warm varietals, and then you go a little bit further and you're into a blast furnace, right? So the zone it's actually fairly small, and then the sub-AVAs can be even smaller. And I think that and the people that are working with the fruit, and it'll depend on the points of distribution and where those go and how the wines have to prove out. But I think there's an opportunity for expansion and new varietals, and we had a varietal dialogue yesterday at our vineyard development meeting, and we're fully planted now. We don't have any more space to put in anything new, but we thought when we put 18 in that there may be some that might not perform well, and we may have to graft over. And so we had that dialogue, and everybody was, we're not feeling that. We're not thinking that anything needs to be grafted over, but there's other things we'd like to plant, right? That we think can be potentials. So there's still a lot of potential up there. And it's new varietals. You know, the world probably doesn't need more Cabernet and doesn't need more Syrah, even though we're growing those, and we've had winemakers. You know, one of the winemakers that we are partnered with that we really respect, and he said that, you know, the Cabernet is grown in too hot of a zone now, and that it needs a little slower ripening and a little cooler. And, you know, we're, like, if you compare our harvest times to Walla Walla, and, you know, the big reds that they're pulling off up there, Syrah and Cabernet, they're harvesting that at the end of August. And we're probably, you know, clear out at the end of September, early October. And that ripening process, you know, because then the temperatures have cooled down. So rather than, you know, being ready for harvest in 24 hours or 48 hours, we might have 5 or 6 or 7 days where we get to that peak, so we can harvest. So that longer hang time is really, we think that's going to be attractive. You know, there's a lot of influence there. You're still getting the marine air coming in, and then you've got the influence of the mountain, and you've got the influence of the gorge. And so while we can ripen these warm season varietals, there's still a significant cooling influence there. So it stretches out the growing cycle.
One of the things I thought was interesting when you were talking about Threemile earlier was the idea that it would live on. It was something you were starting now that was going to exist for the foreseeable future. So tell me about it as a kind of a legacy project for you. What about that excites you, and what do you kind of hope it looks like? What do you kind of hope it becomes?
Yeah, as we've been building the teams, we've really tried to add individuals that are much younger than I am. You know, we did a demographic survey of all the people that work for the companies, and baby boomers like myself now is really just a handful. And the majority of our population is either millennial or Gen X. So the thought that, you know, we've been really, as I said, very picky about adding those resources. So I'm hopeful that there will be individuals that will be managing that property long after I'm gone, and that they will be able to have a good experience with that it will be rewarding for them, and they'll be able to make a connection with the site. And, you know, you get early indications of what the fruit's going to be like, but, you know, vineyards, lots of times it's quite a few years down the road or decades before it really presents itself. And so while I don't plan on going anywhere very quickly, I want to stick to it, right? I'm hopeful that I get to see some of that longer term development, but then, you know, to have that region be well thought of, and have Threemile be well thought of, so that, you know, if I'm a wine buyer in Chicago or New York for my restaurant, and there's influencers wine writers that I'm reading about, both the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal have recently done big articles about the Columbia River Gorge, full page. So how did that happen? What were they? What's feeding them? So, you know, if we could get to the point where a wine buyer in New York was saying, hey, I want wines from the gorge. I read the article in the Times, and I want some products, and who's got that? And so that they would hit lists at some of these, you know, more iconic restaurants in these major cities, and that the AVA, as important as Threemile being recognized, it's the AVA. It's getting that to the point where it has potentially some cachet. And so I don't need to that may be, I might not be around for that. But it's cool to be in on the foundation, the development of that, and know that at some point in time, maybe the pick and shovel work that we did will go to creating one of the next highly thought of AVAs in the world of wine. Mm-hmm. That's compelling.
So as you look ahead start with yourself, you mentioned obviously this kind of new project. What else is on the horizon for you, both business-wise, personal-wise? What are you kind of looking ahead to? Do you have more development plans, and what's next?
Yeah. There's never a shortage of opportunities and things that are attractive to you. Our primary business, Mitchell Lewis, is really doing very well right now, and there's a lot of opportunity for that business, and so I'm still very connected to that, and really having a good time building the team there and developing those opportunities. On the wine side, we still believe that there are, when we named it Mitchell Wine Group, there was a reason for that. Part of it is the distribution and the vineyard, but we see the opportunity, and we'll plan the site as though a winery might get built there. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we will ever get a chance to do that, but wouldn't that be terrific if we could? And so we should plan the site now. There's other aspects of the wine business. We're aspirational to be one of these regional players. We'd love to be in Seattle, and if you could pick off Spokane and Boise, and you could be a regional player, that would be terrific. There's other things that we see, logistics. There's these logistics companies that are very successful, and we've already got a distribution system. So, maybe there's an opportunity for a logistics play. Just the storage business is, there's an opportunity there, and we're growing out of our current warehouse. So we're going to move to a new, bigger, high cube facility. So we've got that old space, and so we might be able to use it as an incubator in some way for some other aspect of the wine business, whether it's storage or logistics or whatever. But you want to do well at what's on your plate, and we all have plenty on our plate right now. So I don't want to be continuing to add projects until we really have great command of what we're currently working on. And so we're growing into what we're currently doing.
Obviously, you mentioned a lot on your plate right now. Everybody's had a lot on their plate the last couple of years. I'm curious, from your perspective as business owner, business developer, tell me about the impacts of the past couple of years on your work and on your on your team. How have you adjusted, and how have you kind of gotten through the past couple of years?
Yeah, we were fortunate. Both Mitchell Lewis and the wine group were essential services. And so those businesses did not stop. They continued to operate. And we made the decision early on that they were, while there may be long-term implications to the pandemic, that we couldn't apply short-term thinking to the situation. So on our primary business, Mitchell Lewis, we have a long inventory pipeline, and the acquisition of inventory is it's a significant process. So we bulked up on inventory. We went the opposite direction of what others were doing. And we did the same thing at the wine group. It started really with the tariffs on wine. And the guys came to me and they said, there's all these tariffs on wine, and we're scared to buy because we're worried we're going to have this product that we're going to be upside down and we're on price. And we made the decision to not think short term, to think long term, that the tariffs would, they'd either get rationalized or they'd sunset or whatever. So we bought. And then the COVID hit. And others dialed back their buying, and we bought again. And so we had a whole lot of product. And then as demand changed, restaurants shut down, but people didn't quit drinking. So it all went to retail, right? So our retail, everything we lost in on-premise, we gained in retail. And then, and actually surpassed that. Retail also grew as a category and offset everything we lost through on-premise. And part of that was just having inventory. And we've kept buying, so that we've got ample supplies. So it's, on the business side, we navigated through all of that fairly well. There wasn't like it was a perfect situation. I mean, we had some struggles with all of that, but we've actually come out of it in pretty good shape. So I feel good about that. But the lessons we learned more as individuals about, working together and trying to accommodate people. There were people that were fearful to come to work, and we dealt with that. And so we pretty quickly became more flexible, and that was a good thing. And then when it was opportune to be able to come back together, we were able to do that fairly quickly as well. So just a lot of good life lessons in there. And we feel good about the way that we navigated through, both on personal and on business. And we feel good about the shape that the businesses are in coming out of the pandemic. And then the supply chain thing is similar, same kind of mess. Products that we used to get on the Mitchell Lewis side in a matter of weeks, that turned into months. And the container story. I mean, we've had containers that, so you plan something with one of the big retailers, and they'd want to put it on ad on a certain month, and we're like, well, the wine's not here. So it ends up moving it, right? Once you finally get it, then it does go on ad, or some of those things get canceled. So it just we've had to be more flexible. Is I think the big lesson for us.
You mentioned earlier when you're talking about kind of why wine, you mentioned that it was something that was kind of from early in life, agriculture, and it kind of grew. So I'm curious, my last question here for you, as you look back, what about wine still today is exciting to you?
Yeah, I think the opportunity to jump into a space and be able to carve out a niche and do good work that people appreciate and get that respect and trust, both from the team, from the audiences, from the community. That's what's been special for me. And then wine is such a unique product, right? It's culture, it's history, it's architecture, it's art, it's this encompassing, back to the lifelong pursuits. I like lifelong pursuits. And wine is, we're constantly researching and learning and growing. And so to have the opportunity for that long-term growth and learning, at the same time doing something that's creative and that has these other elements that are really very inspirational for me, the team building and the science and business and creativity and all that, it's been a win-win. I really feel fortunate that I was able to participate in the wine business. I feel really fortunate. If I had to go back and make the decision again, I would absolutely do it. And looking forward, it just continues to be more and more rewarding. I get a lot of satisfaction out of what we've done. We did the vineyard development meeting yesterday, and I'm not having all the interaction with the winemakers, and there's all of that's really going on through Edwin and through Joe, and they're just jacked about the project. They go, Dave, we can't explain to you how much fun this is and how excited that we are and how excited that others are. So, I'm living vicariously through others, and I get a lot of kick out of that.
Right. So the questions that I have for you, is there anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything we didn't cover that we should have covered?
No, I think this was great. Geez, we went an hour and a half. Oh my God.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I'm good. And again, thank you. And I think you do a good job at this. So good job to you. Good job to you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah,
it's been a lot of practice.
Well, I've had to interface with my share of people over time, and there's certainly people that kind of have a gift for something, and so good for you.
Make sure that's rolling. Okay.
And also, whoever the powers to be are behind the Linfield program and the video archive, you be sure and give them a shout out.
Thank you.
Make sure they hear that.
Will do. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and welcoming us into your beautiful space, telling us your story, and we'll go ahead and let you off the hook.
Okay.